So good morning, everyone. My name is Raquel Black. If you hadn't already met me before, I am Kia'ani, born for Senjikine. I am a member of the Navajo Nation, and I'm the co-working manager for Change Labs. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. And before we get our session started with Nicole and Brian, I wanted to give a brief introduction to Change Labs for those who aren't already familiar with our organization, and then introduce Nicole and Johnny to the group. Officially, Change Labs is a Native-led and Native-controlled nonprofit organization based on the Navajo and Hopi nations. Our goal and our mission is to provide creative workspace tools, resources, and knowledge for Native entrepreneurs. And for those who are near Tuba City or in Tuba City, you may be aware of our co-working space that we had over at the Moenkopi Legacy Inn campus for the past few years. And that space currently is no longer open, but we do have the construction of our new headquarters underway right now, which is going to be located right next to the Tuba City chapter house on Main Street. And I did see updates on the pictures. I should have put it in my slide deck. We have the framing going up, so we should be seeing a grand opening within the next few months. So that's really exciting. So starting early next year, 2023, in a few months, we'll be able to offer services that we usually offer in person, such as desk-based Wi-Fi access, color printing, in-person coaching sessions, and a lot more. We also plan to bring back monthly in-person training for those who are interested and local. And our list of co-working services is constantly being updated. So if you do have any ideas and you're an entrepreneur or interested in starting your business, we are definitely open to ideas on how we can better service our locals. We're really excited to bring this space back to Tuba City and back to in-person to help everyone with growing and building their businesses. So please stay tuned for all our updates. We've been posting them online and it's getting really, really exciting. We are actually accepting RSVPs to a grand opening as well. So if you go to our website at nativestartup.org, you'll see a link for to register for an invite. And moving along, one of our most popular questions here that we get at Change Labs is, how do I start a business? All of our programs and services here, including the co-working space, are designed to help Native entrepreneurs, artisans, change makers, vendors, to both start up and strengthen their businesses. So this is a question that you have, or if you know someone who has this question, my next few slides are for you or them. One program we have available is the Business Incubator. It is one of the only Native-led business incubators for Native entrepreneurs in the United States, and it's right here in Arizona. The program is being led by our Business of Incubation, Jessica Stago, and it is a 12-month program for Native entrepreneurs who want support and training on how to start and operate your business on the Navajo and Hopi nations. Change Labs will be accepting applications for the next round of entrepreneurs who want to participate in the program later this year. And we actually have one of our awesome business coaches who's being promoted into the director's position that Jessica currently holds. And I know she has a lot of really exciting plans for the Business Incubator program. So if you're interested and would like to, if you like assistance with your logo or your website design or your bookkeeping and finances, please check out our website here at nativestartup.org/incubator. Don't say that word when your mouth is dry. There's more information on the website there. All right, and the next question we get all the time is, how do I get help running my business? There's so many aspects to being an entrepreneur, and the answer or solution you're maybe looking for is not always obvious. Here at Change Labs, one of our driving factors is kinship. So building relationships among our communities and our nations and our people. And here at Change Labs, we can help you there. And how we can do that is through our business coaching appointments. We offer free virtual 90-minute appointments with any of our business coaches, which Holly actually is going to be one of them. You'll be seeing her on our website there, and you can book an appointment with her or Christine or Cecilia. They're all really great coaches. And we have very, very bright and eager coaches This is Jessica Stago, Christine again. We have Marsha Gray Eyes. We have Cecilia So, Tim Deal, Holly Patterson, Joe Elliott Nez, and they are scheduled throughout the month, and it's going to be on Mondays from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you'd like to schedule an appointment with any of them, you can go to our link at nativestartup.org/events. And they'll be able to assist you with things like marketing ideas, to accounting, to bookkeeping systems, or if you're just starting out, they can assist you with creating a business model or navigating the Navajo Nation system for things such as your business site lease or registering with the Navajo Nation Business Regulatory. And moving on, another question we get really frequently is, how do I create a website? Until Change Labs can go back to in-person studio hours at our headquarters in Tuba City, I'm going to refer you to our YouTube channel. We currently have over 40 recorded sessions and discussions, each designed for Native business owners and all led by other Native entrepreneurs and creators. Our workshops have covered topics like social media marketing, website design, doing business on the Navajo Nation, and so many more. It's a really great growing archive with a lot of shared knowledge from other natives who really want to see our people thrive and their businesses thrive as well. To access any of our past sessions and even our listing of resources such as grants and other informational events, I'll refer you to our link here at nativestartup.org/resources. And we update this page pretty frequently, so be sure to check in every now and then for any upcoming opportunities. And then one more resource we have, I don't have it on my slide deck here, is our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And I recommend that you check out those pages regularly. We do post our own events and our own updates, as well as those of our members that we have in our programs, and then even our partners and those in our networks. Any information or events that we feel like would benefit our Native entrepreneurs or business owners or our Native creatives, we want to make sure that we share that knowledge with you guys. And then we have Res Rising. There's a whole spectrum of who we consider Native entrepreneurs. And here at Change Lab, we've been curating a list of our own of them. We currently have over 600 Native businesses across the Southwest listed on the site here. And it's a really great resource for helping to start up and run your business as well. And if you're looking for, say, Native made products as well, there are a lot of businesses that list themselves on there, and it's a really, really awesome archive. So if you're a Native business owner yourself or an entrepreneur, and you have services or products that you would like to promote, feel free to go onto the site and list yourself. It's a really simple process. You can visit the site here at resrising.org. All right. I'm sorry if I sped through that really, really quickly. If you have any questions or didn't understand anything that I had shared with you just now, if you want to know a little more information, feel free to email me. My email is raquel@nativestartup.org, or you can visit our website at nativestartup.org. And then the last thing I'd like to touch on is our workshop etiquette, how we can be respectful of our guest time today. We do ask that you stay on mute during the presentation. Nicole and Brian did express that they are more than happy to answer any questions that come up. I think if you will say, put your hand up emoji on the Zoom link here, and we'll make sure that we can have Brian and Nicole answer any questions that you have, or you can populate the chat box throughout the conversation, and we'll make sure to get to that as well before we end the session today. And then, last reminder that our session is being recorded today and will be posted on our YouTube channel later this week. And if you have to leave for any reason, or if the connection gets a little spotty, like mine tends to do from time to time, don't worry about missing any part of the workshop. It'll be saved and recorded there, or saved and posted on YouTube. All right. So I'd like to introduce two very special guests today, Nicole Johnny and Brian Foltyn of REDW. It's a firm for CPAs and financial advisors based out of Arizona, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, if I recall correctly. Nicole has more than a decade of experience of investment banking with capital markets and preparing real estate valuation for tribal nations and businesses on and off the tribal land. Her work includes researching appraisal data to determine the market value of tribal properties nationwide and performing market trend analysis. She's a committed member of the Navajo Nation, and she serves on the audit committee of the Diné Development Corporation Board to oversee its financial health. She also holds an MBA from Pepperdine University and has passed the licensing exam for SIE Series 50 and 52 securities. Brian has 26 years of professional experience in both industry and public accounting. He leads the valuation and related financial services practice as a firm principal and has assisted with over 1,000 valuation, due diligence, and damage and advisory engagements. Since 2011, Brian has served as an expert witness and continues to actively provide damage advisory services in areas of economic damages, and business valuation. Brian also serves in the U.S. trustee program as a subchapter V Chapter 11 trustee for the federal judicial districts established for Region 20. So they're very, very impressive and very, very knowledgeable individuals who are here to talk to us about creating value for your business as an entrepreneur. And now I would like to turn the time over to them. Thank you, Brian and Nicole, for being here.
Thanks for that introduction, Raquel.
No problem. I'm sorry if I stumbled over any of your very impressive background.
No, thank you. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for having us. Thanks for Nicole for setting this up. So this presentation should go pretty well with Change Labs. Raquel, when I was listening to your introduction about how to start a business, how to set up a business, how to run a business. So this will go well with how to create value in your business once you get through those initial steps. And I know as business owners, everyone is always trying to, when they're starting out, just survive and make it work, but having some good game plans in the back of their mind and starting early in the process is a great way to achieve success. So hopefully we'll be sharing a lot of good information. It'll be at a high level today, just to give everybody some background and some general information to get them started. We're always available to answer questions or provide services where we can. And so, Nicole, maybe I'll have you run the presentation and start today.
Hey, this is super exciting. So thank you again. This is just a fun opportunity, I think, to present what we do here. And of course, because, you know, I am Navajo, here's kind of the cool rundown. So yeah, it's Abine. Good morning. My name is Nicole Johnny. I am Kia Ani Nishlando, Najana Bashichin, Kabahe Dashiche, Ado Nashashadina Edashanele, Agut Ego Danas, and Nishlando, Truns Ele Denasha, Gareya Shananish, Arashogan, Bedil Dasanil. So I'm born to the Towering House clan and born for the Blackstreak Wood people. My maternal grandfathers are the Water Edge clan, and my paternal grandfathers are the Tewa Bear People clan. I am from Crystal, New Mexico, so the New Mexico side of the reservation. I grew up there, but currently now I live and work in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Just as a proper way to start the presentation this morning. So those of you who I might be related to you, so hello, family. So first off, myself and Brian, we're from REDW. We do a lot of, primarily REDW is known for its accounting and auditing work, but we do some other cool things as well besides accounting and auditing. And today we're excited to kind of present to you value and what does it mean for entrepreneurs. Let's see. So first off, when you're kind of thinking about valuations, you want to understand kind of what is price versus value. Oftentimes, we think about, we buy something for a price, but is it really worth that amount of money? Primarily price is driven by emotions because you can't really quantify it. It's just more motivation based. I think sometimes we see that a lot in the housing market sometimes of like, oh, I really want this. Or sometimes when you buy something you really, really want, and it could be priced higher than what it's actually just worth itself. I know Brian and was sharing with me, a watch that, was bought, but, it was just a matter of it costing more than what it was actually worth. And so sometimes when you start looking at valuation, you have to just generally understand what's the difference between price and value. And right here, again, price is primarily driven by your emotions. You can't really quantify it. It's more motivation based on that as well. So, so then you ask kind of like, what's it worth, So business valuation, the process of it, it's a process of establishing a value, that accounts for both quantitative and qualitative and tangible and intangible assets associated with the business being valued. So really here it's like value, it's what can be quantified, what can the numbers stand by? What can we look at that is less so emotion driven and less so motivation driven, but what is, really backed up by, the numbers in a business there. Okay. And so then we kind of talk about the standard and premise of value, because it's also important to note, who is this value worth towards, and under what circumstances here. And because if you're looking at businesses that will be, going to continue operations, if you're looking to sell it off, that's a different understanding there, as opposed to a business of where you're looking to kind of just close up shop and kind of just continue on your way of another chapter in life. And so that value and that understanding of what could be happening there is a little bit different. And when we look about, value to whom and under what circumstances, it's important to understand, at least on the valuation side, what is the business going to be doing after this interaction. And so often what we see, the common reasons for valuations, sometimes it's mergers and acquisitions of businesses. So, you're looking to, grow your market. So you might want to merge with someone else. You're looking to, again, maybe acquire new businesses to capture new market space there. You're kind of looking at maybe estate planning. You're looking at damages. You're looking at buy-sell arrangements. You're looking at ESOPs. You're looking at regulation requirements that are sometimes there with businesses, but primarily what we'll be kind of looking at here, which might be the most useful for everyone, is the strategic planning component. What can we build in now as we're building out so that you have value built in all the way through the duration of your business. In its simplest form, business valuation is looking at your earnings or your cash flow, and it's multiplied by a multiple that we have in the market, and it equals kind of your value and your balance sheet there, right? Because primarily we look at, what's on your balance sheet, what's, in your business right there for now, because, for example, a business might be acquiring a lot of inventory. So that builds up your assets on your balance sheet, and, that adds towards the value. So you can kind of see where the value and the balance sheet overlap each other. And that's kind of where it's there. We're looking at the cash flows. How strong are the cash flows of the business bringing in? How are they looking at? What is it projected to look like? Have they historically been strong? Are they looking to increase? Are they looking to decrease? Because all of those do play again into the valuation process, because again, value, we want to look at what's being quantified. We want to look like what's really being there, as opposed to the emotions that we all kind of can sometimes, get the better of us at times. So really here we're looking at the things that can be quantified. We're looking at cash flow. We're looking at your balance sheet. We're really wanting to understand, this part there of the business. Are there any questions at this point? Brian, do you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah. No, Nicole, you said it correctly. So when we talk about value in a operating business, you have two drivers, as this equation is showing. You have your cash flows and you have your assets, and the combination of the two are what create value. And Nicole, if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see these two drivers of cash flow and assets and how they work. And cash flows are a function of your management team, your product offering, your client base. Your balance sheet is typically managed by the same management team. Creating a strong balance sheet is key to surviving economic fluctuations. Back in 2008, I'm from the Midwest, from the Metro Detroit area, and there was Metro Detroit got hit very hard by the recession, since it was all automotive that primarily drives the economy there. And it was the companies with a strong balance sheet that survived that 08-09 recession. And we're going to talk, we're at the end of this presentation, or near the end, we're going to give some case studies to illustrate everything we're talking about. But one of the items here, which is highlighted in a light color blue, is the ability to leverage instruments to realize optimal returns, meaning being able to borrow from a lender to help through volatile times, to help with capital expenditures, all sorts of stuff. And we'll give an example. I saw a question come up while I was speaking. Can you illustrate how emotion can interfere with valuation? Sure. So that goes back to what Nicole was saying, that price and value are not the same thing. So price, it's a fact. Whatever you pay for something or sell something is the price paid or sold. Valuation is more of an art. It's not an exact science, and value can change depending on who is looking for the value and under what type of circumstances. So when we talk about emotion, someone can think that their business or their product or their car or whatever is really worth a lot more than what the market is willing to pay for that. So someone could say, well, I spent the last 40, 50 years building up my business. Valuation tells me it's worth $1 million. However, there's no way I would sell for $1 million. It's I have too much invested. It's worth 10 million to me or whatnot. And so where emotion comes in, there could be greed, for example, if you can't quantify emotion. So all of the emotional aspect kind of factors into price. If you want something, you're willing to pay more, even though it may not be worth that. Where value is, we're looking at quantitative, qualitative items. We're looking at the economy, the industry, the actual business, and we're formulating an opinion. And we'll explain how we do that in the upcoming slide. So hopefully that helps, but thank you for the question.
Yeah, that's a good one there. And so when we talk about the valuation process, there are three approaches that we kind of look at. These are also very similar to, when you do appraisals, I don't know if you guys at Change Labs, you guys did an appraisal there to break ground to do your building there, but these are, very similar to what the appraisal process does as well. Um, so this is like the income approach, the asset approach, and the market approach. So, it's what Brian was saying, kind of the art, you're kind of using these three approaches to kind of come to, a value of a business, or the value of what, you're looking at right here. So when we look at the income approach, we're looking at, primarily like the cash flows. We're looking at, what is a projected cash flow for, the future of the business? What is it looking like there, and analyzing the strong points of this cash flow. And then with the asset approach, this is primarily used a lot more with businesses that have that are heavy in assets as well, because we're looking at the assets of the business there. So sometimes it's like real estate derived businesses, businesses that might be heavy in machinery, et cetera. So that's what we look at when, the asset approach looks at when we're going through this process there. And for the market approach, we're really looking at what is the market doing. We're looking at, the stock market. We're looking at mergers and acquisitions, both private and public, and really seeing what's happening in the market space and in transactions of businesses that are similar to what we would call like the subject company or the subject at hand. So really trying to gauge and using these three items here to help guide and direct like what the valuation process is, and really coming down to, again, value, because all of this leads to what is quantifiable, what can we put numbers behind.
And there's a good question, looks like from Tim. When the market approach is limited, we'll use an income approach, like for rural areas having limited data. So good question. So when we're doing a formal valuation, we consider all three approaches that Nicole just spoke about. We look at cash flows, we look at historical cash flows, and more importantly, future cash flows. We look at the company's balance sheet to make sure that the assets are generating enough cash flow that they're worth more than the tangible value of those assets. And then we look at the market approach. And so we define the market as starting with publicly traded companies, what's happening with SEC regulated companies, which are typically much larger and more diversified than privately held companies. But we start there and we try to see, is there a good enough sample that we can make appropriate adjustments and use them as a proxy for the private company we're looking at. We then kind of go down, we start with narrowing our scope on what we define as the market, and we look at the M&A market. So there are a lot of databases out there that we subscribe to that compile merger and acquisition data. So companies that are bought and sold. And these can be private companies buying other private companies buying public, and public companies buying private. So combination of all of them. And there's usually pretty good data out there that we can look at to see what's happening in the M&A market. And then lastly, we define the market as what's happening with the actual business. Have there been transactions within the business? Have owners bought or sold their interests? Have any acquisitions been made, or even any bona fide offers been presented to the company? And so we look at all three to formulate our opinion. So we don't typically just pick one approach where we say, well, the company's in a rural area, so there probably isn't a market approach, so we'll stick to an income approach. But we try to do all three. And if, like Tim asked, if the company's rural and there really aren't good market comps out there, what we may do then is still go through the process of trying to identify market comps and even see if we can use them to support our value on the income approach, meaning can our future cash flows be, we'll develop like an implied multiplier and kind of compare that to the M&A market. So somehow we'll be able to relate what's happening in the market with the business, whether it's rural or a specific niche or what have you. So, and I guess that's a good segue into this slide, that whole discussion. So when we talk about value and the income approach and even the market approach, big picture, general statement, investors are looking for cash flow. What cash flow will be available to be distributed to the owners? And so nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in the future with any business or just in terms of anything. But pre-pandemic, we would look historically at a company and see if there's a normalized or stabilized set of revenue and earnings, and use that in connection with what's happening in the industry and the economy to try to project what earnings and cash flow could be generated going forward. And it's even same thing if an investor was buying a publicly traded stock, like if you were buying Apple stock, for instance, you look at what Apple might have done yesterday, last week, last month, last year, and so on. But at the end of the day, you're not buying earnings that Apple generated yesterday. You're buying earnings that Apple plans to anticipate generating. You're buying next tomorrow, next week, and next month, and next year, and so on's earnings. And the same thing happens with private companies and private company valuations. But what we're trying to communicate here on this slide is, with the pandemic, sometimes looking historically at what a company did is not representative. The pandemic really created uncertainty. It created industry winners. It created industry losers. Some companies have new operating costs because of the pandemic. Some companies have additional revenue or lost revenue, depending on what industry and where they were positioned during the pandemic. There are supply chain issues that everyone's hearing about. There's labor shortage issues that everyone's hearing about. What does that mean? Are people paying more for their goods today than they typically would if there wasn't a supply chain issue? Or are companies paying higher wages to team members, labor, management in order just to get people in the door? And is that going to be consistent going forward, or is this just a blip on what's going on? And so it's really a challenge in today's environment to say, what is the future? There's a lot more uncertainty than we typically encountered pre-pandemic. So
really here is that kind of the cool stuff we'll be getting into is like, so how can you kind of start planning, for success for your future? How can you start adding, more value into that? And so really, an enterprise or a business's value is influenced by, certain things that you might or might not have control of. And so with this pyramid here, you see from the top part, the macroeconomics, all the way down, the public and equity and M&A markets to the industry specific and business specific. You really see that, as a business owner, you really have the most control you have right here is your business specific. Like you understand your team, your product, your pricing, you understand it, and you can really position yourself well because those are the things you have control of. And you do have some control as well in terms of like your industry of what you're in. It might be a niche market, but you still can kind of have a bit of a hand in there. But as you go up the pyramid, you really don't have much influence over, the public market, the M&A market, and nonetheless, the macro kind of like, none of us really have a say on interest rates of what we want it to be like. None of us really have a strong hand into curbing this, like the labor market that we see. So all the large macroeconomic areas, we're part of the players of that. We don't really have a strong hand in that, but where you do, where business owners have just a strong influence to shape and have a hand in influencing your value is just kind of limited to your operational your strategic and your financial control of the business. So that's kind of where the best place you have to really start setting yourself up for success.
So this slide hopefully will tie in a lot of what we've presented so far. Even though don't get excited, we're not done. But so this chart right here, which I know is a little small, these are multiples of cash flow. We call it EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's a cash flow metric. And if you remember the valuation equation that Nicole described a few minutes ago, the valuation equation is cash flow times a multiple. And so here's a chart of the multiples since 2016, and they're pretty volatile. And these multiples or multipliers are mainly for smaller businesses. We call that the Main Street market. And what you can see here is in 2020, 2021, during the pandemic, multiples were up a little bit. And basically, when you think about this pyramid that Nicole just spoke about, when we at the top is the macroeconomic conditions, you have in 2020, 2021, beginning of 2022, you have a lot of stuff going on. You have COVID, so you have uncertainty. You have COVID dollars entering the marketplace. You have baby boomers that have been thinking about retiring. COVID hits and they say, I'm ready to retire. And so it's kind of creates the perfect storm. And then you have a lot of buyers out there who are sitting on capital that need to deploy it. And so this is just my opinion, it's not factual, but what I saw happen was a lot of the blue chip companies were purchased during the pandemic. Blue chip meaning larger, strong earnings, good product, strong management team. They all got purchased first. And so you fast forward to today, and I should say that the reason that they were blue chip is you think of the pyramid, they were doing a lot that we're going to talk about in a minute at the bottom of the pyramid with their own specific business. They were planning for value and being strategic and operational and all this stuff. And so then this perfect storm M&A market hits and they got purchased first. You fast forward to today and you see this multiplier takes a huge dive in the second quarter of 2022. And I'm not saying that businesses are being sold for this number of 2.9 times, but again, this is data compiled from smaller businesses. And so this dive, so you think of the equation cash flows times a multiple, so the multiple goes down. We have now persistent inflation, so the Fed is trying to curb it, and they are raising interest rates so that people can try to stop their spending. With interest rates going up, businesses, smaller businesses specifically, will see less cash flow. Revenue goes down, their interest expense, if they have debt, goes up. You have the war going on in the Ukraine. You have supply and labor issues that we just talked about. And you have just previously all these blue chip companies that were being bought up that had been thinking about going to market and went to market because of whatever reasons, the pandemic, the owner's age, and so on. And so these blue chip companies got bought up, and you fast forward to today with all this economic stuff happening, and you have these companies that are left that might be, call it less than blue chip. So they might be smaller or volatile earnings or what have you. They're just not premium. So there's more risk involved, meaning that an investor would need to get a bigger return on their investment getting involved with this company, buying an interest in the company. So they're willing to pay less to try to get a bigger return. You have all these economic factors going on. And so you can kind of understand why this pricing multiple has taken a huge dive recently. So just my 2 cents on what's happening today. So we're still seeing buyers that are aggressive, looking to deploy their capital and buy companies, but they're being more selective. I think the general thought is most of the good companies got gobbled up over the last year and a half. That's my thought. Oop, I see questions coming in, so maybe we'll pause. Was there a large increase in companies getting purchased during the pandemic? Yes, there were. The M&A activity was huge. I mean, I've never been so busy in my almost 30 years. But right now we're seeing deal volume down like 30% and so less deals are getting made. Companies are, it's a general statement, maybe smaller. And we're also starting to see buyer's remorse. So because of all this uncertain times and a lot of deals happening, huge volume of deals happening, there were a lot of creative deal structures, meaning people were paying big multiples for companies, but they were trying to hedge this payment, meaning that there was some contingency associated with it, or maybe some earnouts, meaning, well, we'll pay you this amount of money, but your company needs to hit these targets before we'll pay you all that money. And all these creative deal structures are what we would call litigation magnets. And we're starting to see buyer's remorse. We're starting to see earnout disputes. And so we also do what we call damage advisory. So when a purchase price gets disputed or an earnout gets disputed, we help the parties quantify and try to reach a resolution. And so we're seeing M&A, at least in our own practice, we're seeing less what we call financial due diligence, less valuation for M&A purposes. And now our damage advisory practice is starting to overtake that, where during the pandemic with the courts being closed and just deals happening, we saw very little litigation. I see another question. I have frequently found that people's balance sheet and income statements are not accurate. How often do you find this? So we're going to have a great case study about this that will show you what happens when you don't have good financial records. And these case studies are things that have recently happened to our clients. And it'll address this question exactly. And also our upcoming slides too will address, as we're planning for value, how to financially, meaning financial statement plan, so you don't get burned when you do try to exit.
So kind of, I think that leeways into this kind of good slide here.
Yeah, we're going to talk over the next few slides about how to plan for value and how to create value. And the theme of these slides is going to be start early. Even if you're not planning, you can't even think about an exit or a sale, or you think you have 30 years of runway. You always want to ultimately think about, well, what is my exit? What is my strategy? And how will I benefit from this? And so we try to tell clients that their business is an asset. And so just like any asset, it requires care, monitoring, planning, because if you want to maximize the value, it needs to be nurtured through your whole years of operation.
And I think it's really important too, because, you know, like in our Navajo ways, we're always taught of, you know, like always like thinking ahead, always planning for the future. So, what better way to kind of, implement, our cultural teachings into kind of understanding how that can play into, business planning and, and really the strategic levels that you can do now and thinking about it now. And so when you're, years down the line, you've already kind of built this value in and you understand how you can shape it and how you can better, your business for that.
Yeah, and planning, I think the key item here on this slide is it says under key elements, market positioning. So if you're always strategic and doing things intentionally when the time comes to sell, like we just talked about in 2021, when everything was right, there was capital, there was lots of buyers. It was just a robust M&A market. The companies that were well positioned were the first to go. These were people that were planning and doing the right things and decided, well, let's get out, and got the most value or price, whichever you want to use, for their business. And now we're seeing the multiples are on a decline. When we talk about planning for value and market positioning, one of the things that we talk about, I know this sounds pretty basic, but what creates value is growing revenue, increasing profit margins. And so those are just two high-level items. But one of the ways that companies can grow their revenue is through acquisition. And a lot of reasons that companies do go through an acquisition is one, to, as I just said, to generate more revenue, to create more money. But there are other reasons that we wanted to highlight. It can create job opportunities for the community. You can access new markets that maybe the community needed. You can acquire competitors to take out your competition. And so I thought it could be helpful if talking just really briefly about the make more money piece. So as entrepreneurs, everyone wants to make money. And so sharing the private equity model on how private equity firms make more money through acquisition might be a useful background. And so what typically private equity firms do is they set up a platform. Say that they decide they're going to buy up HVAC companies. And so they'll purchase an HVAC company, and they typically purchase for a multiple of cash flow, which again, we call EBITDA. And they might pay 6 times their cash flow for this HVAC company platform. And then they start growing the platform by buying what's called bolt-on or tuck-in acquisitions. So they start buying other HVAC companies, and they pay something like 6 times EBITDA or less, depending on the size. Typically, size is related to risk. The smaller the business, the more risk is involved. And when you think about size and risk, you think about return on investment. You're willing to pay less for a smaller, riskier business because you need a bigger return on your money to take those risks. But they grow their platform by acquiring other HVAC companies for a similar multiple or less. And then they package this all up and they sell this platform to another private equity firm or maybe even a publicly traded company for a multiple greater than that 6-time example. So they might pay 6 times EBITDA and do their tuck-on or bolt-on acquisitions for somewhere between 3 and 6 times EBITDA. And then they take this big platform and they sell it to another PE firm or publicly traded company for 10 times EBITDA. So they make their spread through their exit multiple. And typically a private equity firm might do this. They'll tell their investors, we'll start and build this platform over the next 5 years and then exit at the end of 5 years. And they get their return and so on. I also thought it would be helpful that when we're looking to grow, there is a distinction that we get asked a lot between financial due diligence and financial feasibility studies. And so a financial feasibility study is typically done not per se for an M&A purpose, but through growth. We're saying that you have a business and you want to know, is it worth expanding your business, rebranding your business, opening a second location, things like that. And so a financial feasibility is a tool that people like us can help with, where we evaluate your options. We show you, here's what it may look like going forward. Here's your return on investment. Here are the risks associated with it. When you're talking about growth through acquisition, through M&A, you can go to the next slide. That's what a lot of buyers and sellers go through, what's called financial due diligence, which is different than a feasibility study. So financial due diligence is examining everything you can. So trying to confirm before you commit, where financial feasibility is more in evaluating. And so in financial due diligence, which will show you what it's basically looking to uncover things, both financial, legal, IT, again, everything you can think of. And in our case studies in a few minutes, we'll share how financial due diligence uncovered certain things because the business owner didn't properly plan and so on. So just wanted to share with the group that distinction.
Here, after strategic, here's kind of looking at like the operational things. So really with operational planning, you're kind of looking at improving, your productivity, improving your revenue streams, your cash flows, overall, just trying to really reduce your overall risk. And so really here, what we wanted to highlight is to kind of to do these metrics of like your productivity, your revenue, and your cash flow streams. You really have a strong control in that, and when you do start looking at who your leadership team is for your business, because those are definitely the people that will really help you in making sure that your business runs smoothly, makes sure that it runs well, so that, you are bringing in good revenue, that you are making sure that the business is doing, what it needs to do. And so really here, it's that the depth and your quality of your leadership team is, a very good operational point of what you can do as a business owner. And it's also going to be investment in PP&E, as well as how much are you, reinvesting back into your company? How much are you willing to, put back into it, and making sure that you're doing it well. So again, because the purpose here is you really want to make sure that your operations are good, that they're solid, and that you're building value here. And then when we get to kind of the financial part of this, it's evaluating your past and future financial performance, and the impact of strategic and operational improvements. So really here, the key elements of this is, your financial reporting. We'll have again, like our case study at the end, talking about how, your financial balance sheets, how that can, really make sure that's key and solid, because again, those are the items that we're going to be looking at when you do go down the valuation road. It's going to be a restatement of significant or unusual events. It's the detailed projections as well. So, we really want to look at these elements here when we're looking at the financial component of business planning.
And this slide goes with the question, I think the last question too, about financial statements and whatnot. And if you think of what a buyer is looking to get into, if you have, say you turn over a QuickBooks file that isn't very accurate, and a business is running through personal expenses, you go to a sports event and run the tickets through, even though you're not taking any clients or whatnot. The more unreliable a set of financial statements are, the more risk is involved to the buyer, and they're going to pay less. It's going to affect your multiple. So sometimes people use their businesses as like a personal bank account, and they think, well, I can avoid certain taxes or whatever. I'm just disorganized. But ultimately, if you're not thinking about that and planning, you're going to pay the price on your exit multiple. So you might save some tax today. I mean, notwithstanding that it's illegal, but when you go to exit, you can't explain to a buyer that, well, I only show $100 of profit for the year, but it's really 10,000 because I ran all this personal stuff through. They're not going to buy it. And so the better quality your financial statements are, because at the end of the day, that's the story that an investor of a company will read, are the financial statements. So if they're prepared by an accountant or a CPA, there's different levels of preparation, and a small business obviously doesn't need audited financials, which are kind of the gold standard. But just getting financial statements prepared by an accountant is a big deal. And not that this is part of our case study example, but I just recalled years ago a business owner who was running a lot of stuff, personal stuff through his business. And we were doing a valuation for this individual, and he was looking towards retirement, and the value wasn't what he was able to live off of if he was to retire. And he had said, well, I run all this stuff through the business. Can you add it back and tell me what the value is? And so we can do that. I mean, we have, we can run scenarios and analyses and things like that. But what we explained to him is that a buyer isn't going to just accept their word that, well, there's really X dollars of additional cash flow that we're not showing. You have to show them. And so I said, you need to start running the business correctly and need to show like 3 to 5 year of historical performance that a buyer can buy into and say, this is what I'm buying, and I agree with that. And he ended up hiring the CPA firm that I was at and running his business correctly. And he was planning for a 5-year exit after that to show that this is what the business really looks like, because he was going to realize that investment through his exit multiple.
Example, because I think often, it's really good to, I think financial statements are often sometimes a big heavy lift when you're starting out. And, sometimes you might want to think like, okay, this is important, but how important? And I think this kind of highlights a little bit more of like, the importance of how these financial statements like plan into, not just the operation of the business, but also the value and any type of exit strategies. Here with the market and timing, we're looking at, kind of what we saw in the slide with the chart on the multiples, that when you really have a good alignment of, economic, market, and company opportunities, when all of those are in good alignment, that's when you can kind of receive the maximum value there. You can kind of see how, if you recall the slides back of the chart, that, the companies that were priming themselves well did realize, really good value when the markets and everything were timed very well. And really right here, our key elements is kind of just looking at, again, the triangle that we've seen of where you have the strongest influence is of your industry and your business, making sure you're kind of priming yourself that. So when you're primed at the bottom and the top part of it does well, you're really making sure you're capturing that maximization. And so here, when we're looking at what Brian's example was, the exit, and how you can start, what it looks like when you're kind of near the end of what your business is looking at. And so when you're thinking about succession for your business, often we think about, do you want to transfer your business? Do you want to let your kids have it, your grandchildren? You're thinking about that as well. Or do you want to sell it to another person? Often those are just the two alternatives that people think about. But there's obviously a lot more ways to think about succession. There's just, there's multiple ways to kind of look at this.
Nobody is starting a business with their exit in mind as bankruptcy. But because of the current economic times, the uncertainty, the fact that lenders can drive the bankruptcy process, meaning that a company doesn't go into bankruptcy typically until their bank pushes them into it. So if you're not making payments on a line of credit or some sort of term loan or whatnot, you don't have to file bankruptcy until the bank starts calling that loan or whatnot if you can't service it. And so because of these times, because interest rates are going up, because banks are now pulling back on their lending, we might see an increase in companies having trouble servicing their debt, staying afloat, paying their creditors, things like that. And so wanted to just share that there is something that's called subchapter 5, which is part of a chapter 11 bankruptcy, and it was recently created. And again, not advocating anyone to go into bankruptcy, but it's good to know that this subchapter 5 filing was created so that small businesses can have similar opportunities that large businesses have. And so what happens is if a business meets certain requirements, which we'll show you on the next slide, they can't service their debt, they can file the subchapter 5 filing. They can retain the equity in their business, run their business, work out a hopefully plan with their creditors in an expedited manner with minimal professional fees, and then get back on their feet to continue running. So these type of bankruptcy filings were historically only offered to large companies, wasn't really fair. So if you go to the next slide, 3 general requirements are that you have to be a business, you have to have debt that's associated with the business of $7.5 million or less. So you can't have larger debt than that. And it has to be for operating purposes. It can't be some sort of contingent debt or something like that. And if you meet kind of these 3 big requirements, you can actually go through the subchapter 5 process and try to recover as quickly and efficiently as possible. So just a note, like I said, nobody wants to go into business thinking about bankruptcy, but if anybody does come across an obstacle, there is this out that was created. And this last slide, that before we get to the quick case studies, are just some of the things we're seeing that's affecting value that businesses didn't prepare for in the past, or just surfacing because of the economic times. One are these creative deal structures. Anytime you're looking to bring on a partner, if there's something creative like a contingency or whatnot, you'll probably wind up in litigation at some point. Most businesses that do want to go to market don't sell, and that's a function of not planning early. Bad financials, poor management team, things like that. The deals that do go through, they can fail for a number of reasons, but the main ones are that the appropriate due diligence wasn't gone through. And just a reminder, due diligence is trying to uncover everything you can. And so buyers go through due diligence so they know what they're getting into, but sellers can also go through due diligence. It's called sell side due diligence, and sellers go through due diligence as a planning process so that they can have things uncovered before they go to market, and they can be on the offense rather than the defense. They can fix the issue, or they know how to address it should it be uncovered by the buyer. And then there's also post-merger integration. Anytime you're adding to your business, you have issues? Is there the right culture fit? Management team, do they get along? Are there duplicate jobs? Things like that. And then the valuation issues, again, this is more managing your business as an asset. Do you keep enough cash in the business so that it operates? Do you have a lender or lender relationships? Are you running personal stuff through your business? Is everything recorded? Are your financial statements accurate? All this stuff, which might be helpful in the short term, doesn't pay off in the long term. And going full circle to that valuation equation, when you think of the multiple, if your multiple is 5 or 6 times cash flow, and you say run $50,000 of personal expenses through your business to try to save taxes or whatever, disorganization. If you think of a 5 or 6 time multiple, that's like $300,000 of value you're leaving on the table because your business wasn't run correctly. And we can give some case studies right now that show you exactly what we've been talking about on not properly planning for value. And I'll go through these quickly because this is a lot of information and I know we're almost out of time. But the first case study, we call it Project Green. It was our client was looking to purchase a cannabis business, and this business had they handled all parts of the cannabis industry. They grew the plants, so they had a grow house. They processed the plants and made CBD oil and sold cannabis and things like that. And then they had their retail outlets where they sold everything. And so our client was looking to buy the operations. They were already in the industry and they wanted to add on. They were are a private equity firm. So this is one of those bolt-on or tuck-in acquisitions. The letter of intent, which was the agreement that says we want to buy your business, was for $48 million. Think about the valuation equation. It was a cash flow time a multiple. And they said that they had X amount of days to do their financial due diligence to verify that they want to go forward with the deal. And what we found, helping our client, the buyer, do the financial due diligence, is that the cannabis businesses didn't have good financial reporting. So what would happen is they would grow their plants and they would sell their plants to their processing facility. And then the processing facility would then do what they do and sell it to the retail store, and the retail store would sell it to the consumer. And so they were kind of doing like A plus B plus C plus D. So they were adding up all this revenue, even though they were selling it to themselves. So they forgot to eliminate when the grow house sold to the processing facility, if they sold it for $10 and then the processing facility sold it to the retail store for $10, that's $20 and so on. It was additive where they forgot to eliminate that they were selling it to themselves. That $48 million purchase price, when we did all the elimination and found that they had bad financial reporting, was something like in the $20 million range. And the seller, not our client, agreed with what our findings were, but said, well, we just can't sell the operations for that much. They had too many partners, they had too much debt and so on. And so the deal didn't close, which was good for our client because they would have overpaid by 20 some million dollars. Bad for the seller. They had bad financial reporting. They weren't able to capitalize on this buyer. Who knows what? I mean, cannabis is going through all sorts of regulation processes. So did they miss their window? I don't know. And I don't know what's happened since, but that would be one example of poor financial reporting. project curtains. This was our client was looking to purchase an enterprise. It was not on their reservation. And they were purchasing it for other reasons besides return on investment. The tribe hired us to do financial due diligence again, see what we could uncover. And we uncovered that they had a customer concentration issue, meaning that all their revenue, 90% of their revenue was coming from one group. And so we brought up to the tribe, if you purchase this enterprise, would that 90% of their historical revenue continue? Probably not. So the owner was part of a community, and all of his revenue came from his community. So if someone came in from a different community, revenue wouldn't continue. And so the tribe asked us then to do a valuation of this enterprise, which we did. The valuation went from originally a $3 million purchase price to like nothing, almost, I think it was $0. And so obviously the seller didn't sell the business for $0. Our client didn't buy the business. And so the seller, with having revenue from only one type of customer, didn't properly plan, because now when they want to exit, they're going to have to sell their business to a particular buyer, which may or may not exist. So yeah, so there's an issue with they didn't diversify their client base or their product. Next case study, Project Block. This was a company that manufactured cement blocks. The owner was ready to retire, wanted to sell his business, engaged us to value the business. It had an extremely low value that if it was sold, the owner would not be able to retire and maintain his lifestyle based on those proceeds. And what we found, the reason why this business, one of the reasons it had such a low value was because it wasn't generating good cash flow, because they weren't able to grow. They didn't have a lender relationship where they could get a bank facility, a line of credit, a loan, things like that, so that they could expand into new markets, new clients. And what they were doing over the last 10 years is they were charging their clients, they were giving them 30-day terms to pay their bill, and they negotiated 90-day terms with their vendors. So they never thought that they would need any type of banking relationship, and all they were doing was kind of floating money, almost like a pyramid scheme. They would collect quickly from their customer and then pay off their vendor, and never really, just kind of survived over a decade and never identified that's what they were really doing, and they weren't growing and just kind of stagnant. I think we have one last case study. Again, plan early. So this case study is, we thought we would leave you on a successful note and not just doom and gloom about everybody who doesn't plan accordingly. So this is a recent project that we just completed. It's a soft drink distributor, and they're looking to get into, to grow their business and to acquire new territories. And so they said to us, we're going to buy this territory, this business, and we have enough cash, we'll just pay for it and then go on. And we consulted with them and told them, well, it's not always the best idea to just pay cash for something. That's why banks are there. That's why you want to share risk. And what we did was we did this M&A advisory project where we did a debt capacity study showing them, here's how much you can borrow from various lenders at different interest rates. And here's different scenarios on how much bank debt you can take on and how that affects your cash flows and how that affects your return on investment and your payback period, so that they can make a more informed decision on, do they want to take on debt? If so, how much? And depending on the interest rates and the terms and all that, here's how that affects their return on investment and payback period. So that was a great project, a client that wanted to do this correctly and engaged us, and I think we completed it last week. So
Absolutely like that, planning ahead. It's always a good thing to do, always wanting to see how you can be best informed with the information you have at hand. I think that's always a good, solid step forward for planning for success and thinking ahead.
Thank you so much for doing this, for your presentation and taking the time to be here, Brian and Nicole. That was a lot of information, and really, really great and valuable information. And I'm really happy that we have it here and we're able to share it with all of our Native people. Thank you for our audience members for all being here and sticking through all of this information. I know it's a lot. I'm sure Nicole and Brian are open to questions. I see their contact information there on the screen there. And if you miss any part of their presentation, this session is being recorded and we will have it posted to our YouTube channel later this week. And then if you missed any part of my presentation, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. I have my email here. I'm at Raquel@nativestartup.org, and just make sure you don't forget that little C in there. RAC@nativestartup.org. Yeah, that's all we have for today. We do have another presentation or workshop coming up in 2 weeks again. I don't have the graphics available for that one, sadly. We will be hearing from Native American Bank. Veronica Lane and one of her colleagues, Desmond, will be speaking on accessing capital on Indian country. So be sure to keep a lookout for that registration link, and we'll be posting that all over our website and our social media postings as well. So keep a lookout for that. And thank you again all for being here. If there isn't any last minute questions, we'll go ahead and end now. All right, everyone have a good day.
Hi, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation and the information. We are part of an economic development board with one of the chapters, Shanto chapter actually, and Raquel and I are both board members on the on that board. But I had a question on acquiring a building on the reservation. How you would put value into that, and also put a value on it and determine return of investments long term. I guess it comes with so many questions on is there a way that we're able to establish a value and show our community and our chapter officials that there is, because what they worry about when there's a building up in their community is who's going to maintain it, what's the cost of keeping it, should we just demo it, and there's a question about demolitions. And within that, there's a process of all types of studies that have to go in there. So, and I'm just thinking more from the term of how you would put the value on a building and show it as a capital investment, and then how to determine a return of that investment for a community. That was my question.
Nicole, do you want to answer that, or would you like me?
I think it can be answered with both of us. I think acquiring a building, definitely there being on the buyer side, of course, would require, you know, an appraisal of the building itself. But I know that the difficult part of that is because, you know, the appraisal, you know, because it's on tribal land. So of course there's kind of like the first little hurdle in getting the appraisal done as well. So I can think about that at in the first component of, you know, acquiring that. And the second part, I would wonder if does the chapter there have like an intended use? Like, do you guys know how the building will be used and how that might, you know, where the value might be used in acquiring this building? Is it just going to sit as is? Is it going to be turned into something for community use? Or, you know, I think that would be kind of the step there. And Brian, I don't know if you want to add in of, you know, if activity does happen there, how can you best put in some value there?
Yeah, so disclaimer, we don't value any tangible assets like buildings, machinery, things like that. When we talk about business value, it's intangible, the operations, the cash flow, things like that. But I can answer your question. I just wanted to disclose that I'm not a real estate appraiser. But typically, as Nicole said, they determine what's the highest and best use of that building and what cash flows it will generate going forward, much like what we talked about in an operating business. And then they take those cash flows and they would apply what's called a capitalization rate, a cap rate. And a cap rate is a percentage. So let's say it's 10%. And so you divide your cash flows by this cap rate, and it comes up with the value, what the business might be worth. And so to answer your question about return and payback period and what it'll generate, these cap rates, essentially they're, if you take the inverse, so if it's 10% and you take 1 divided by 10%, you'll get your, call it payback period, like how long it will take to accumulate the distributable cash flows that come up with that investment. And so real estate appraisers will be able to determine what the cap rate is. So what investors are willing to take as their payback period for that building and things like that. And so you would need an appraiser that's familiar with where the building will be located. And I know there's different depreciation laws, I think, on tribal land and things like that. So
I think the value, because to bring it kind of more full circle to kind of like what we would do. So for illustration purposes, if Shanta there was looking to acquire this building because, you know, you want to create office spaces there, you know, and you have projected, you know, cash flows of what could be seen from, you know, rents or things like that. Or if you kind of divulge it a little bit more, then you can kind of have the hand of like the valuation process more so in it. But I think, you know, when we think about the presentation again, of like what we saw today, of really looking at, you know, the value to whom and like under what circumstances, you know, the standard and the premise of value, again, kind of understanding, you know, what's the purpose of acquiring this building, you know, is there additional components like to the process of acquiring it? Because again, like Brian said, we don't do appraisal work, rather, or, you know, valuation of tangible items, but rather we do more so of the businesses, the intangible on it. So I think if there was a little bit more to this concept of, you know, acquiring it, then I think we could apply a little bit more quantitative aspects to it that might be a better way of how we can answer it. And I hope that adds some clarity and less confusion.
Yes, thank you. So as a board, we would more show our community and our officials more of a intangible report of cash flows that would be their opportunities for what we can do to bring in revenues and create capital through those intangible assets, right?
Yeah, and I guess I would also too, that might be a better way of showing that to the chapter there, of just understanding too that after an appraisal is done, using this building for XYZ activity, you know, kind of tailoring it, showing that there is, you know, the potential cash flows for whatever was going to be in this building, I think would show a better way of what the value is of going through this process of acquiring a building.
There's also, we just touched on feasibility studies just to address the difference, but feasibility studies in the real estate industry are very popular. So they can, a real estate appraiser can do a feasibility study on if a building would be feasible or solvent being used for this purpose, assuming that you're incurring this much debt and here's the purchase price and so on. So
yeah, because I think that's really the big step to do in what you want to do as acquiring this building is really going to be the appraisal. That's going to really be the biggest step going forward in this process, is really having that done.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for confirming with the feasibility study. We have 3 other projects that we're doing, current projects, and we're doing an overall feasibility study for those projects within the area. So thank you for all the information.
Thank you too. That's exciting to hear that about Shanto.
All right. Are there any further questions? All right. Awesome. And then Brian and John, Nicole, just so you know, we do have several of our Change Lab staff members here that I did mention at the beginning of my presentation. You guys met Holly. We also have Cecilia, Tim, Jessica, and Marsha online right now. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you for your presentation again. And I hope to see you guys again soon.